The Bondrite Hall gleamed like a sanctum built to worship perfection, its glass ribs stretching toward the sky. White light diffused through sheets of liquid crystal that turned the air pale and sterile. Beneath that shimmer, silence rippled, a silence that felt arranged, rehearsed, and weaponized. The citizens of Cakes Thalassa gathered in terraces, their translucent garments reflecting the city's glow, their faces composed in polite detachment. The scent of sterilizers and salt hung faintly above the ocean's pulse below, a reminder that even the sea had been tamed here. In the center of the hall, on a disk of living light, stood Sira Anf, her bare feet pressed against the platform's cold surface, her green skin catching fragments of illumination like polished jade. Her white hair clung damply to her back, a remnant of the processing showers, the city's ritual cleansing before public display. The Mysica silk halter across her chest was too tight, a civic cruelty designed to make her seem fragile under the lights, while the sea lass net at her hips failed at even pretending modesty. It wasn't clothing. It was a statement, property disguised as ceremony. The crowd shifted, whispers humming like static. Some sipped their Furlan seed coffee. Others murmured numbers, speculating on sponsorship rates, though no one truly meant to raise a hand. Sira's pulse beat hard against her throat, not from fear but fury a sharp, clean flame she had learned to hide behind a calm mask. She would not cry. She would not beg. Not for them. The steward's voice echoed through the chamber, smooth and neutral, a tone polished by centuries of bureaucracy. By civic covenant, this bondrite represents one cycle of lawful sponsorship. Shelter, food, instruction, no ownership implied. The lie slid through the air, and the crowd swallowed it as truth. The platform's projection flashed the first pledge price. No hands rose. The silence grew, heavy and deliberate. Somewhere above, the turbines hummed a deep, distant rhythm, like the heartbeat of something mechanical pretending to be alive. Sira lifted her chin. If they would not choose her, then let them see she did not care. Let them look into her eyes and find defiance, not desperation. The steward called again. Second offer. The words fell into the stillness like stones into deep water. Sira's gaze swept across the tiers. Faces blurred into one another, indifferent, symmetrical, forgettable. And then, near the back, movement. A man's hand rose, steady, deliberate, cutting the silence clean in half. Cassian Holt didn't flinch as every head turned toward him. His clothes were plain, his jacket marked with the insignia of the Civic Maritime Bureau. His stance carried a kind of weary authority, the kind that came from years spent following rules he no longer believed in. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a man who'd stopped pretending not to see. The hall murmured in disappointment. So soon, so anticlimactic. The spectacle had ended before it could bloom into humiliation. The steward's stylus flicked once. Recorded. No competing offers. The words finalized her fate. The light beneath Sira dimmed. A tremor passed through her shoulders, not from weakness, but from the effort of containing rage. She searched the man's face, measuring him the way she measured every potential threat. His eyes met hers calm, gray, unflinching. Not predatory. Not pitying. Just there. She could not read what he wanted, and that unsettled her more than cruelty ever could. The gates opened at the hall's far end, revealing the exit concourse, a bridge of clear glass that stretched over the living ocean. A steward gestured. Transfer complete. The crowd began to disperse, their curiosity already dissolving into the next entertainment. As Sira stepped down, the lights caught the water beneath her feet, pale waves surging against the city's foundations. Cassian waited at the threshold, hands behind his back, posture controlled but not commanding. "East run," he murmured, his voice quiet, professional. Fewer cameras. She glanced at him, her tone sharp as salt. I'll decide where to walk. He inclined his head slightly. And I'll keep up. They walked side by side through the corridor of glass and whispering machines. Outside, the city gleamed too bright, too clean, every edge polished to erase the existence of dirt or blood or guilt. Above them, drones drifted like silent eyes. Below, the sea burned green with turbine light. Sierra's jaw ached from clenching it. She knew what the crowd had seen, a spectacle of mercy, a display of civility. None of them would remember the name of the woman beneath the light. But the man who had raised his hand would. And she would find out why. The corridors beneath Cake's Thalassa always smelled of brine and machine heat, a blend that clung to the skin, no matter how sterile the city claimed to be. The maintenance passage they took pulsed faint amber, narrow and quiet, after the glare of the hall. Sierra's bare feet made no sound on the smooth floor, but the ocean's low rumble traveled through the glass beneath them. She walked half a step ahead of Cashin, not from trust, but instinct, to keep him in her periphery, to measure distance. He didn't crowd her. He moved with the steady rhythm of a man who had learned long ago that silence was safer than explanation. When they emerged into the outer concourse, the air hit colder. The translucent dome above filtered moonlight into blue fragments that shimmered across his jacket. Beyond the glass, the sea pressed up against the city's underbelly, restless and vast, a living thing pretending to be contained. "Where are you taking me?" she asked without turning. "East Strut," he said. "My loft's there. You'll have heat, food, and a lock you control." She stopped, suspicion sharpening her voice. "A lock I control? You'll see." For a moment, neither moved. The city around them murmured air, vents sighing, cables humming, turbines churning like a slow mechanical heartbeat. She started walking again. It wasn't trust, not yet, just exhaustion disguised as decision. His loft sat embedded into the infrastructure of the strut, part habitation, part workstation. When he opened the door, the room breathed warmth, scented faintly of oil, kelp light, and something sweet underneath cooked sugar, maybe. Thin ropes of bioluminescent vines coiled along the walls, washing the space in soft turquoise glow. A small galley, a sleeping bench, and a wide window facing the ocean. Everything built for function, not display. Sierra lingered near the entrance, hands clenched in the folds of the jacket he'd given her. "You live here alone," she said. "Easier that way," he replied, setting his ID card on a hook by the door. No noise. No one to report to. She scanned the room, no hidden cameras, no secondary exit. Just the hum of turbines under the floor and the rhythmic hiss of the heating coil. Her voice came low. "You get pleasure out of collecting strays, Holt?" "I get tired of watching people disappear," he said. He filled a small metal pot with water and set it to boil. "You'll eat first. And then? Then you can leave if you want." The water simmered, steam clouding the glass. The smell of dried berries filled the space. When he placed the bowl before her, she hesitated. "Poisoned?" she said flatly. "Expensive," he countered. "I wouldn't waste it." That earned him a narrow glare that might have been the beginning of a smile if she had remembered how. She tasted the porridge warm, dense, faintly sweet, and said nothing. He didn't watch her eat. He sat across the table, posture still, eyes on the sea outside. It unnerved her more than if he had stared. "You talk like you hate this place," she said at last. "I work for it," he answered. "That's not the same thing." Her spoon slowed. "You think sponsoring me makes you righteous?" "No," he said. "Just responsible." Silence settled again, thicker this time, but less hostile. Outside the window, manta arrays drifted through the current, their wings trailing silver light. Sierra leaned back, studying his face in the blue glow. His features were unremarkable, strong lines softened by fatigue, but his eyes carried a steadiness she couldn't decode. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "There were others before." "Because you were about to vanish," he said simply. "Someone had to raise a hand. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." She looked away before he could see the tremor that almost reached her lips. When she finally stood, she didn't hand back the jacket. He didn't ask for it. The heater ticked softly as he dimmed the kelp lamps. The glass window threw back the reflections, her pale hair against dark fabric, his outline blurred by ocean light. "You can take the bench," he said. "There's a blanket. I'll stay on the floor. I don't need your pity." "It's not pity," he said. "It's logistics." Her jaw tightened, but she sat anyway, folding her knees beneath her, the bowl empty on the table between them. He went to the workstation, hands moving across a floating map display, lines of light tracing the currents below the city. She watched him in silence, not understanding the symbols, but recognizing the calm in his movements, the same calm he'd shown in the hall. It wasn't arrogance, it was control. And something in that steadiness made her heart beat slow, almost against her will. For the first time in days, her eyes felt heavy. The turbine's hum below blended with the rain against the glass until the sound became a lullaby. Before she slipped under, she heard him switch off the console and mutter something almost too quiet to catch. Maybe a prayer, maybe an apology. She didn't ask which. For the first time in days, her eyes felt heavy. The turbine's hum below blended with the rain against the glass until the sound became a lullaby. Before she slipped under, she heard him switch off the console and mutter something almost too quiet to catch. Maybe a prayer, maybe an apology. She didn't ask which. When the light finally dimmed, and Cake's Thalassa's reflection faded across the sea, Sierra slept not safe yet, but unbroken and Cashin sat awake beside the map of moving water, wondering what kind of world required a man to break its rules, just to act human. Morning seeped into the glass city like diluted light through water, soft and colorless. The turbines beneath Cake's Thalassa murmured in their steady rhythm, and the floor of Cashin Holt's loft carried that vibration like a slow heartbeat. He was already awake, seated near the workstation, reviewing current data on a suspended display. Lines of blue and green drifted across his reflection, currents mapped into logic, chaos tamed into patterns. Behind him, the faint sound of movement. Sierra stirred on the bench, hair tangled, the two large jackets sliding off one shoulder. For a moment she just stared at the ceiling glass ribs, refracting light into fractured arcs, unsure where she was. Then the scent of heat and sugar reached her, and memory returned. The hall, the hand, the man who didn't look away. "There's food," Cashin said without turning. His voice was calm, low, carrying none of the ceremony of yesterday. Steam curled from a small bowl on the table. She approached cautiously, bare feet silent against the glass. He didn't watch her. He simply waited, giving her the illusion of choice. That small courtesy unsettled her more than command ever had. She ate slowly, eyes flicking between him and the water outside. The city above was waking two transport drones slicing through the mist. The distant hum of market decks, the filtered light of industry pretending to be dawn. When she finished, he shut off the display and stood. "There's work below the east turbines," he said. "I have to check the pressure locks." "And I?" "You can stay here or come. Either way, the door seals from inside." The phrasing was deliberate, and she caught it. A choice, real or staged, but a choice nonetheless. "I'll come," she said. "I don't like being locked in." He only nodded. Together they descended through the service lift, its translucent walls revealing the ocean folding around them. The pressure hum deepened as they went lower, into the city's skeleton, where light turned green and the sound of turbines was almost physical, thrumming through the metal bones of the world. The lower decks were another city, entirely workers in grease-stained coveralls, dripping pipes, the constant hiss of coolant. The perfection of the upper domes dissolved into honest machinery here. Cashin moved like he belonged. Sierra kept close, alert but curious, eyes absorbing every gauge and wire. At the turbine gate, he crouched to adjust a valve, his motions efficient, precise. "You used to be military," she said, watching the way his hands didn't tremble even under pressure. "Fleet navigation," he replied. "Before the reforms." "Why leave?" "Because I was tired of steering by other people's orders." The honesty of it startled her. He didn't dress it up, didn't soften it with regret. Just fact. They worked in companionable silence. He showed her how to read the pressure indicator's thin threads of light that pulsed with the rhythm of the sea. "Each one's a heartbeat," he said. "If it falters, we lose balance." "You speak of it like it's alive." "Maybe it is. Everything that moves is." She studied the flowing grid on the panel, tracing a finger through the light. "And what happens when it stops?" "The city panics." He looked up then, a small smile flickering beneath the weariness. "They build their calm on things they barely understand." She nodded, feeling that truth sink deeper than he intended. Her entire life had been built on the same illusion obedience, mistaken for peace. When the maintenance was done, they stood at the railing, watching the currents spiral beneath the glass. Schools of luminous plankton shimmered between turbine shadows, the color shifting with the pressure flow. For the first time, she saw beauty in the machine's hum, not oppression. "You've lived here long?" she asked. 8 years, he said. "Before that, ships, outposts, cold air, no walls. This place felt stable. And now? Now it feels like a cage that learned to sing." The words caught her off guard. A quiet confession buried inside a metaphor. She turned to him, studying his profile, the faint scar near his temple, the way his eyes seemed always half-focused on some memory. "Why raise your hand that night?" she asked. "You don't seem the impulsive type." He hesitated. "Because I saw what the hall does to people. Silence becomes permission." I was done being silent. They rode the lift back up, water streaming down the outer glass like rain on a forgotten sky. Sierra leaned against the railing, the faint motion of descent soothing after the turbine noise. "You think one act can change anything?" she asked quietly. "No," he said, "but it keeps me from becoming like them." When they reached the loft again, the air felt warmer, lighter. She moved toward the wide window, placing her hand against the glass. The sea pressed back, its cold strength familiar yet distant. Behind her, Cashin spoke softly. "You don't owe me gratitude." She didn't turn. Good. I wasn't offering it. But there was no venom in her tone, only fatigue. "Still," she added after a moment, "you're not what I expected." "Neither are you," he said. Outside, the turbines pulsed their slow rhythm beneath the glowing water, and the city's reflection trembled like something alive and uncertain. For the first time since her arrest, Sierra let herself breathe without armor. Cashin returned to his maps, and the hum of the sea filled the silence between them, a silence that no longer felt empty, only unfinished. Night fell over Cakes Thalassa like a tide of glass-dark shadows, and the city's glow dimmed to a pulse beneath the waves. Cashin's loft shivered with the rhythm of distant turbines. Sierra sat near the wide window, her reflection merging with the light outside, half-human, half-ocean ghost. The day's work still clung to her skin, salt and metal, and faint heat from the turbine decks. She had learned quickly, memorizing the signs and lights he showed her. But each new piece of knowledge stirred an old anger. The more she understood the city's perfect machinery, the more she saw the cruelty that held it together. Cashin moved in the background, silent but present, preparing tea as if the ritual itself kept him balanced. The air between them hummed with the same quiet tension as the glass under their feet solid, but never entirely still. The tremor came without warning. A deep vibration, low and resonant, rolled through the struts like thunder trapped underwater. The kelp lights flickered, the window groaned, and somewhere far below, metal screamed against pressure. Sira froze. For an instant, she wasn't in the loft anymore. She was back in the detention transport. Engines shaking, cuffs cutting into her wrists, guards shouting through the noise. Her throat closed. Breath vanished. She pressed her palms to her ears, but the hum grew louder, until all she could hear was the memory of her own heartbeat slamming against steel. Sira, Cashin's voice cut through the sound, firm but low. It's a surge. Nothing more. You're safe. She didn't answer, didn't even seem to hear him. Her body locked tight, a statue carved from panic. Cashin took a step forward, then stopped himself, lowering his hands. I'm not moving closer unless you say so. His tone held no command, only presence. You're here, not there. The walls hold. The floor's steady. Look at me. She forced her gaze up. The lights swam in her vision. Blue and green flickers reflected off his steady frame. The tremor peaked, then began to fade, leaving silence so heavy it almost hurt. Sira's breath came back in ragged bursts. I'm fine, she whispered, though her voice trembled. No, Cashin said softly. You're remembering. She turned her face away, ashamed of the crack in her composure. I'm remembering being watched, she said through clenched teeth. Every time I breathed wrong, someone decided if I deserved to keep doing it. Her hands trembled against her knees. Cashin nodded slowly, his voice steady as an anchor line. You're not being watched now. Say it out loud. I'm not being watched. The words came quiet, but they were hers. When the tremor finally died, the hum of the turbine softened to its usual rhythm. Cashin waited another heartbeat, then crouched to collect the shards of a glass jar that had fallen from the shelf. See? He said. Nothing's broken that can't be cleaned. Sira stared at him, the calm in his movements almost strange. No lecture, no pity, just quiet order in the aftermath of chaos. She knelt beside him without thinking, picking up a piece of glass. Their fingers brushed, and this time she didn't flinch. Together they worked until the floor gleamed again, the air slowly evening out between them. When they straightened, he handed her a damp cloth. You should sit, he said. The surge is over. She leaned against the wall, drawing her knees up, eyes closed. I don't like losing control, she murmured. Then you'll like surviving it even less, he replied, not unkindly. The room's light steadied, glowing in soft amber tones. Cashin turned off the main console, letting the sea's natural luminescence spill through the window. Sira opened her eyes to the sight of the water, glowing faintly below, plankton drifting like stars. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then she said, quieter now, You've seen this before, haven't you? Not the surge, the fear. He didn't deny it. Years ago, during patrol, after the Neuron collapse. Whole crew went silent after the quake. Some never came back from it, even if their bodies did. He sat across from her, back against the opposite wall. You learn to keep people steady, even when you're not sure you are. She watched him, noticing how his gaze didn't wander from her face. Not inspection attention. It made her chest ache in a strange, unfamiliar way. Why keep helping people when it keeps breaking you? She asked. His jaw tensed, then eased. Because not helping breaks worse. The faint sound of rain began above the glass ceiling, a rare drizzle from the city's moisture vents. The drops hit the panels like a whisper, rhythmic, cleansing. Sierra pulled the jacket tighter around herself, feeling the warmth in it settle her nerves. Cashin stood and poured new tea. The scent filled the air, metallic and faintly sweet. He handed her a cup, waiting until her hands steadied before letting go. "It's not pity," he said again, voice softer now. "If that's what you're thinking." She met his eyes over the rim of the cup. "Then what is it?" "Maybe just two people trying to remember what human sounds like." Her lips parted in a small, tired smile, the first real one he'd seen. Outside, the rain slowed to mist. The turbines hummed again, no longer a threat, just sound. They sat there, across from each other, the quiet between them filled with everything neither could say. Sierra leaned back, the steam from her tea curling around her face. "You didn't fix me," she said finally. "But you didn't leave me broken either." Cashin looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "That's enough for me." The city above continued its sterile rhythm. Indifferent to their calm, but in the small loft beneath the eastern strut, something had shifted quietly, an unspoken promise formed not in words, but in the choice to stay when the shaking stopped. The morning light cut through the mist like a dull blade, turning the ocean beneath Cake's thalassa into shifting bands of silver and green. Cashin was awake before sunrise, as always, his body still tuned to the discipline of old fleet schedules. He sat by the window, the kettle hissing softly beside him, while the turbines hummed their low, unending note. When Sierra woke, she didn't speak right away. Her eyes found the window first. The light reflected across the floor, the faint steam curling upward from the mugs he'd set out, one for each of them. It was strange how easily this quiet had become routine. She sat up slowly, the jacket still wrapped around her like armor turned comfort. "You always wake before dawn," she murmured. "Old habit," he said. The fleet ran on cycles, not clocks. She gave a small, crooked smile. "You ever unlearn any of them?" "A few," he replied. "Not enough." The simplicity of his answer settled between them like a sigh. She reached for the tea, inhaling the faint metallic sweetness that had become familiar. Grounding days blurred into a rhythm neither of them had planned. Mornings spent checking turbine data, afternoons patching the east strut's leaking coolant lines, evenings spent in a silence that was no longer wary. The city still whispered outside, polished and precise, but inside the loft, the air carried something warmer, imperfect, alive. Sierra had begun venturing beyond the loft, walking the narrow bridges between maintenance decks. The first time she returned, damp with sea mist and defiance, she told him she'd seen the upper turbines from below. "They look like hearts," she'd said, "pulsing light through veins." He'd only nodded, knowing she was learning to see what he saw. One evening, as the light faded and the city's glow deepened, a message blinked on Cashin's console, a civic notice. He read it in silence, his jaw tightening slightly. "What is it?" she asked. "Your bondrite cycle," he said quietly. "It expires tomorrow." Sierra froze, her cup halfway to her lips. "And the committee sent renewal papers. If we sign, you stay under sponsorship another cycle safe, registered, documented. And if we don't, you're free," he said, "but unregistered again. The city won't protect you." She studied him carefully. "What do you want me to do?" "It's not my decision." His voice was even, but something in his eyes betrayed him, a flicker of fear, or maybe restraint. She turned away, looking out at the water where the turbines turned in steady, indifferent circles. "You think I can live under their mercy forever?" She said, "You think I want to be anyone's name on a file?" He didn't answer, and she didn't need him to. They sat like that for a long time, the unsigned papers on the table between them. Finally, Sira reached out, fingers brushing the edge of the form. "If we sign," she said softly, "I go free." "On paper, but if we don't?" Her voice trailed off. "Then we both are," Cashin finished. The words hung in the air, unsteady and real. He stood, crossed the room, and set the papers near the heater. "You sure?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes steady. "You raised your hand once," she said. "Now I'm raising mine." He hesitated for only a moment before striking the ignition. The thin sheets curled, blackened, and disappeared into ash. The flames reflected in her eyes, small, bright, and alive. For a while, neither of them spoke. The sound of the turbines filled the room again, slower now, like breathing. Sira rose, crossing the narrow space between them. "So that's it," she said quietly. "No contract, no papers. Just this." "Just this," Cashin agreed. She looked up at him, studying the quiet lines of his face, the exhaustion that never quite left his posture, the steadiness that had kept her anchored since the hall. "You ever wonder if we're just two ghosts in a machine that doesn't care if we exist?" she asked. "Every day," he said. "But I'd rather haunt it with you than live clean somewhere else." Her breath caught a sharp, surprised sound that turned into a half-laugh. "You're terrible at poetry," she said. "I don't try," he replied. When she reached for him, it wasn't sudden. It was slow, deliberate, the way the tide folds into shore. Her hand brushed his arm, then his chest, as if testing that he was real. "You could have left me there," she whispered. "You could have walked away." "I've done enough walking away," he said, voice barely above a murmur. She tilted her head, eyes bright in the low light. "Then stay?" He did. The distance between them closed like a held breath breaking. The kiss was quiet, hesitant at first, then certain. No hunger, no rescue, just recognition. When it ended, they stayed close, foreheads resting together, the hum of the turbines beneath their feet matching the pulse between their ribs. Outside, the rain began again, thin and silver against the glass. The city lights shimmered across the water, each one a reflection of something trying to last. Inside the loft, the ashes of the bond papers cooled in the heater tray, a faint curl of smoke rising like a secret set free. Sira leaned her head against his shoulder, eyes closed, whispering into the quiet. "You didn't save me," she said. "You just stopped pretending I needed saving." Cashin exhaled slowly, his arm resting around her. "Good," he said. "Then we finally got it right." The turbines below shifted tone, steady and strong. As Cake's thalassa turned through the night above them, still perfect, still blind, unaware that somewhere in its glass heart, two people had quietly rewritten the meaning of freedom. Dawn rose slow and pale, the light of it refracting through the ocean, until Cake's thalassa looked like a dream made of glass and ghosts. The city's surface shimmered gold above the deep green sea, its perfect domes catching the sun while beneath, the turbines hummed their endless rhythm. Inside the loft under the eastern strut, warmth lingered from the night before. The air smelled faintly of salt and tea. Cashin stood at the window, one hand resting on the frame, watching the sea turn with the tide. His reflection merged with the glass of man, carved from duty and quiet regret, surrounded by a world that mistook order for peace. Behind him, Sira stirred awake. The soft scrape of fabric was the only sound she made. She rose slowly, her bare feet padding against the glass floor, and joined him by the window. Her hair fell in loose white strands around her shoulders, catching the morning light like threads of fire. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "Old habit," he replied without turning. The fleet trained me to watch for storms before they arrived. She smiled faintly. Still looking for them? Always. They stood side by side, silent for a moment, watching the turbines below spin in their perfect circles. You think it's over? She asked finally. The bond, the papers, all of it? On record, yes, Cashin said. But the city doesn't forget easily. He paused, his voice lower now. There's something you should know. She looked at him, cautious but curious. The power that keeps cakes alive, these turbines, the glowing veins in the sea, they run on Ilari biocores. Extracted decades ago during the settlement wars. A council buried it, called it energy conversion. It's not. Her breath caught. You're saying? Your people keep this city alive, he said. Even now. The energy, the light the city feeds on what's left of them. Syrah's hands curled into fists. She looked down through the glass floor, to where the sea glowed faintly with trapped radiance, the same shade that pulsed faintly beneath her own skin. So I've been living on their bones, she said. Her voice didn't break, it hardened, honed sharp. Every step I take, every breath I borrow. You couldn't have known, Cashin said quietly. No one was meant to. You knew. The accusation wasn't cruel. It was fact. I suspected, he admitted. And you stayed? Because I thought I could watch the machine without being part of it. I was wrong. She turned to him, eyes blazing beneath the calm. Then we ended. Syrah, no, she said, cutting through his hesitation. You raised your hand once to stop them from owning me. Now raise it again. Her voice shook the air around them like a current snapping against glass. Cashin looked at her, at the fierce stillness in her stance, and something within him shifted. He'd spent years keeping this city alive. Maybe the truest act of loyalty now was to let it fail. He nodded once. We can overload the deep turbines, he said. Flood the conduit lines. The biocores will dissolve back into the sea. How long? Minutes, he said. Once it starts, there's no reversal. Then we don't reverse. She stepped closer, her face inches from his, her voice low. They built this place on my people's silence. It deserves to hear them one last time. They moved together through the corridors, silent and precise. The lower struts hummed with pressure. The walls vibrated with the pulse of the city's veins. Cashin peed into the restricted levels using his clearance code old, but still functional. Lights flickered as if the city sensed what was coming. At the turbine core, the water churned violently behind reinforced glass. The bioluminescent glow was almost beautiful, deceptive in its serenity. Syrah placed her palm against the control panel, feeling the current beneath. The hum resonated in her bones, familiar, ancestral. They're still here, she whispered. Waiting. Cashin's fingers flew across the console. Ready? She didn't answer in words. She pressed the final key. The turbines screamed. For a heartbeat, the city's entire structure seemed to inhale. Lights burst across the water, like veins igniting from within. Then the hum faltered dot above. The spires of Cakes Thalassa flickered as if the sky itself blinked. The glow beneath the sea brightened, then fractured into thousands of drifting motes, like stars released from their prisons. The turbines slowed, their rhythm breaking apart, their hum turning to silence. The ocean began to glow, not with artificial light, but with something older, freer. Syrah stood motionless, eyes wide, tears glinting against the reflection. They're free, she said. They'll remember. Cashin's breath came shallow, the console sparking beside him. We should go, he said. But she shook her head, still watching the waves. Not yet. The loft's foundation trembled as pressure recalibrated. Water rushed through the lower pipes, flooding the conduit halls. They ran, side by side, their reflections flashing in the emergency lights. When they reached the East Strut's upper bridge, the view stretched open, the city above glowing faint gold, while the ocean below shimmered alive. Sira stopped near the railing, breathing hard. "You could still go," she said. "You don't owe this." Cashin looked at her, rain beginning to fall in thin silver lines across the glass. "Neither do you," he said. "But we stay anyway." The turbines beneath them gave one final groaning sigh, then went still. The hum that had defined their lives vanished, replaced by the low roar of the freed sea. For the first time, Higgs Thalassa was quiet. Truly quiet. Sira turned to him, water glinting on her skin. "What now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "we build something that doesn't run on the dead." She smiled faintly, that same quiet, defiant curve he'd seen the first day under the hall's cold light. Together they stood, watching the ocean reclaim its color. The city's glow faded behind them, leaving only the sky, the waves, and the sound of their own breathing. Far below, the last traces of artificial light dissolved into the deep. The sea glowed with its own memory, not borrowed, not stolen returned. Cashin slipped his arm around her shoulders, the gesture simple, human. Sira leaned into it, her voice almost a whisper. "You think anyone will remember us?" He looked out across the water, where the dawn stretched clean and wide. "If they don't," he said, "the sea will." And as the first true sunlight touched the glass bones of Higgs Thalassa, the hum that had bound them both for so long finally broke, and in that silence the world began again.